This is Jennifer Coffey from the Office of Special Education Programs, and this is the second informational webinar. So I would ask that you watch the first webinar and look through those slides first. And this supplements that first informational webinar with some information related to questions that I've received so far. So when I receive questions and I answer them, I try to put together another webinar with the information I provided so that everyone in the public who is interested in this competition will also have that information. So be on the lookout for future webinars as well, and I'll show you where to look for those. So this is the State Personnel Development Grants Program competition, and that's CFDA 84.323A for fiscal year 2020. Wanted to let you know that this is guidance and it's summarized from the application package, from the notices. And so I'm not going to give you all the information you need. You have to read the documents really carefully. I also want to let you know that if you have not applied for a discretionary grant with OSEP before, that we have a recorded webinar for you, and you can see the link there on the third bullet. Today's topics, we're going to talk about grants.gov, contractors and subgrants. I'm going to talk about one area of the selection criteria, and hopefully that'll help you with the other selection criteria. FTE is full-time equivalency or equivalent. And so that's going to help you think about the kind of FTE you want in your project personnel. And then absolute priority 3, I'm going to delve into that a little bit more because I've received a couple of questions about it. So first, again, a reminder that this webinar does not take the place of reading through everything. I'm going to highlight certain things, but not others. So please take a really good read with your team. It may be providing best practice tips here and there, but this is a peer-reviewed competition. And so those peer reviewers, people from state educational agencies, from parent centers, from technical assistance providers, those peer reviewers will be making their own decisions separate of the advice I may give you, although they will also be watching these webinars. So just keep that in mind. If you are receiving any kind of continuing new funds from the SPDG, so that's non-competing continuation costs, that's the formal description of that. I sometimes call it new SPDG money. So if you're getting money, receiving money for your SPDG, in fiscal year 2020, you cannot apply for a grant at this time. However, if you are going to be in a no-cost extension for fiscal year 2020, you may apply. So no-cost extension, you have not received any new money, but you are continuing your grant. So keep that in mind. We do plan to have future year competitions. There are some unknowns. We can't promise it, but we do plan to have a competition in 2021. And 2022, those fiscal years. The only eligible applicants are the state educational agencies, the SEA. So for example, New York State Department of Education is a state educational agency. So no other eligible applicants. I also wanted to let you know that we had a year-long series of webinars to help potential applicants write their SPDG application, and that can be found at this link. So NASD put on those webinars in partnership with us, and it will help you think about your professional development system and how to respond to some of the requirements of the notice. I also want to let you know that informational webinar, the slides can be found at OSEP Ideas at Work. You can see the link there. The recording can also be found there, and I gave you those links just to make things a little bit easier for you, but you can also find it on grants.gov. And so if you go to grants.gov and you put in the keywords 84.323A, which is the CFDA number, it will take you right where you need to go. I do recommend that you subscribe to receive the emails about this competition, because if anything happens with the competition, like if there's a new informational webinar added, something changes, like a due date, which I don't expect, but that has happened for other competitions, then you'll receive an email about it. Otherwise, you might not know unless you're checking on a regular basis, grants.gov. And I'm going to show you how to get to what I call the application package, which is the instructions or the instructions. So go ahead and get right to this page. So you can see this is grants.gov, and you can see up here I use the keyword 84.323A. And up here's a synopsis of the overall competition, the notices, version history. I'm on related documents right now, and you can see here that this is the recording for the previous informational webinar. So this recording will also be added to this page. And then you can also see there's the full announcement with all the information. This is the instruction. So that's just the notice that went out in the Federal Register. The final priority and definitions, that's important. The notice inviting applications, and then these PowerPoint slides that go to that informational webinar so you can click through to the links. I think that's pretty important. And then on the package, you can find here that you can sign up to apply or preview, and you'll need your sign-in information, so your login information for that. So if you do choose apply, you can see what that's going to look like. And then from there, if we're on the package information, let's see, and the related documents, version history, let's see what's there, and then the synopsis. So those are all the things that you're going to see. I just want you to get comfortable with the information. So that's going to link you right to the notice. But what you want to get to is the instructions. And the instructions are going to give you all the information, all the directions about how to do this application. And so let's go back. And I find the instructions package, what I also call the application package, difficult to find. And so I have put that link right into this PowerPoint for you in case you also have difficulty finding it. But this is what the instructions or application package look like, and it's got everything in it. It's got all the notices, the selection criteria, the general information for completing it, you know, all the background information. So I really recommend you dig into that and give it a good look. And as always, you can call or email me with questions. My name is all over every document. All right. So back here. There we go. All right, so the notice contains 3 absolute priorities, and I talked a bit about that in the last informational webinar. I'm going to dig in a bit to absolute priority 3. It's new, it's a bit confusing because we haven't done it before, and so I just wanted to give a little more instruction on that. So absolute priority 3 is its own funding category, and the department intends to award 1/3 of the SPDG grants under the competition to grants under absolute priority 3, provided the applications are of sufficient quality. And they're going to be rank ordered separately than the ones that are responding to absolute priority 1 and 2. So you've got to really clearly identify we are addressing absolute priority 3. You still have to respond to absolute priority 1 and 2, no matter what. And you can still, even if you wrote for absolute priority 3, you could potentially be funded under absolute priority 1 and 2, but not on that separate slate. So just to let you know, it's confusing. There is a plan that we will fund 1/3 of the funded applications under absolute priority 3. However, they have to be of sufficient quality to be funded under that. We don't know exactly what the numbers will look like. It's not a requirement to respond to absolute priority 3, but I do want everyone to understand the plan for funding. Absolute priority 1 and 2, you absolutely do. No pun intended, you do need to respond. You are required to respond to absolute priority 1 and 2. And again, on the informational webinar, I talked about what priority 1 and 2 are, that first informational webinar. So I just want to highlight again, we intend to award 1/3 of the SPDG grants under the competition to grants under absolute priority 3, provided applications of sufficient quality are submitted. They'll be rank ordered separately in that. So it's going to be a different slate, so to speak. So just to remind you that you are expected to come up with a mechanism to provide the personalized professional development. It doesn't necessarily need to be a stipend. It needs to be whatever works for you to fulfill the requirements of the priority. The big idea is to provide the personnel who are going to receive that professional development some choice, some selection, some voice in the selecting of that professional development. And there are requirements that these professional development options need to count towards state or local professional development requirements as appropriate, such as the number of hours personnel must fill or the competencies they must acquire to obtain or retain certification. And always needs to be designed to meet their individual needs and thus improve results for children with disabilities. So it's considering their needs, it's got to improve results for children with disabilities. They should have a say in selecting it, and you're going to decide what that looks like. So more on absolute priority 3. I'm going to be talking about the professional development practices supported by evidence. And for the SPDG, the State Personnel Development Grants, we call it the SPDG, that is considering how you're going to do selection, how you're going to do training, how you're going to do coaching, how you're going to do systems intervention, and administrative support. So those are all considerations in building out a professional development system. We talked quite a bit about that in that, those year-long series of webinars with NASD. In addition to that, I've provided some more resources in the first informational webinar to give you a sense of that. You'll be describing for absolute priority 3 how improvement in implementation of SPDG supported practices over time will be demonstrated by participants in these professional development activities, and then how you're going to use funds to sustain the use of SPDG supported practices. So we talk about coaching and mentoring that happens after the initial training. And then this is teacher retention. So if you're focused on teacher retention with these activities, you're going to have a way to collect the information about special education teachers and if there's still special education teachers up to 2 years after they receive the support. And you have to also consider improved outcomes for children with disabilities. So the personnel engaging in this personalized professional development, their use of the new skill set that the professional development is providing them has that changed outcomes for children with disability. You'll have to have data to demonstrate that. All for absolute priorities 1, 2, and 3. This is your entire SPDG, whatever priorities you write to, be it 1 and 2 or 1, 2, and 3. You must award a contract or a subgrant to at least one LEA, at least one IHE, which is a university, college, and either a parent training and information center or a community parent resource center. These are OSEP funded parent program centers. If you have a CPRC, community parent resource center in your state, that's fine. If you only have a PTI, you would go with the PTI. You can contract and subgrant with other organizations, other partners, but this is that base level of what you must do. There's no specific amount that you need to put toward it, but you need to have each of these partners, and there needs to be some kind of money going through them, whether it be a contract or a subgrant. It depends on what makes sense for you. Again, the number 2 is you may go ahead and do other things, including your lead agency under Part C. You could contract or subgrant with them. I did receive one question about whether you need to name who these partners are, say for the LEA, the district, or the IHE. And best practice would be that you would name them in the application, that you'd have some kind of supporting evidence, like a letter of support. That said, we know that states have to go through contracting processes and can't always sole source, and that's fine. You can explain that in your application too, that although you're proposing this partner, you'll still have to go through your state required processes. We also received a question about full-time equivalent and what would be appropriate for those personnel leading this grant, such as the project director, project coordinator. And you've got to do what makes sense. You can, if it's something that this grant program won't pay for, that's okay. You still should explain the time on the project the person will have. And the reviewers will be looking to make sure you do have enough FTE toward the project so that someone's at the helm and and doing a good job, but there is no recommended amount per se. I also received a question about the use of funds for professional development. So not less than 90% of the funds should be used for activities under subsection A, which are professional development activities, and up to 10%, so not more than 10%, will be used for the other activities described in paragraph B. And so they were asking, you know, well, does the OSEP Project Directors Conference count? What does that count as, et cetera? And it's really kind of a broad definition of what you do to support the activities. And so you have to choose at least one activity from each. And, you know, however many activities you choose for the professional development activities, you have to use at least 90% of your funds towards that. But part of doing those activities could be going to the Project Directors Conference. That's supporting your ability to carry that out. So you have to kind of think about your overall goals in that area and what's helping you to carry those out. The GOPRO, the performance measures, you know, just to keep in mind that these apply to any of the professional development activities that you choose, including if you're responding to absolute priority 3. These apply to, and I just spoke about that a bit. And in Informational Webinar 1, I talked about where you can find resources to support this. But the question I received was, does the applicant need to provide the evidence-based professional development worksheet with their application? And they do not. It's a matter of talking about how you'll do these things. So talking about how you'll do training, coaching, how you'll do data collection, how you're going to support administrators and leaders, how you're going to think about systems intervention and how they'll work. So you're going to be describing in your narrative, but you do not need to give us an attachment of the EBPD worksheet, the evidence-based professional development worksheet. I think I might have accidentally said HQPD before. That's separate. But you do not need to provide the evidence-based professional development worksheet. All right, GOPRO Resources, again, I had talked about these the last webinar, but I just wanted to give them to you again and remind you that they exist. And then I also talked about the fact that there are some uncertainties, and as much as possible, you want to paint a picture for the reviewers and, you know, for anyone who's going to read. You know, if you're funded, you're still going to want to be able to share your application. You're going to paint a picture of what you want to accomplish and who you're going to work with, knowing that some things may change. This is a very uncertain time, but think about the picture you paint, and where needed, you can describe the fact that there are some uncertainties. You can also request a lower level of funding that first year, as long as it doesn't go, if you are a state or the District of Columbia or Puerto Rico, it cannot go below 500,000. But the other applicant, the outlying areas, cannot go below 80,000. So you can start lower, but this is not quite as helpful if you're a small population state and your amount is already near 500,000. I talked about expectations for engaging families. And so really thinking about what your partnership with the Parent Program Center is going to help you do, how much money needs to go towards it, and how are you going to be supporting your family engagement work and the family members who engage with you in the work. We talked about this last time. I talked about District of Columbia, DC, and Puerto Rico. They're in that 500,000 plus range, and then the outlying areas, they need to go above 80,000. I did receive a question about how much a state should ask for if they haven't had a grant recently. And they could look at a similar state and see how much they've been funded. They could also, if they've had a previous grant, they can see how much they were funded the last time. They could also call and talk to me and talk, you know, because I have those numbers. But, you know, just to get a sense about what you've recently been funded under, because we have not received more money. We've actually lost some money in the SPDG, and we want to make sure that we can grant awards to all those applications of sufficient quality. So considering your population, et cetera, when you're writing for the budget narrative and how much you'll be asking for. I also received a question about the selection criteria. So these are the selection criteria for quality of project design. And they asked, when you look at number 3, the extent to which the services to be provided by the proposed project involve the collaboration of appropriate partners for maximizing the effectiveness of project services. So they asked what the difference was between that and number 4. Oh, sorry, not number 4. Number 5. The extent to which the proposed project will establish linkages with other appropriate agencies and organizations providing services to the target population. So here's how I see the difference, knowing that the peer reviewers will make their own decisions about the selection criteria and how you respond to them. The collaboration of appropriate partners to maximize the effectiveness of your project services. So this is about how you do the work and bringing in all the partnerships that are help you to be really effective with your target population and what you're trying to accomplish. And then number 5 is about, so you're going to need to provide these linkages so that you can disseminate information, so you can gain information about how you're going to do your work. These might not be the partners who are helping you carry out the project, but they're still important when it comes to the population you're serving. And so you want those linkages. You want to align when possible, whereas with the effective services, that's more about integrating, about doing work together, is my read on that. All right, I've got the grants.gov, email support, phone number support. So if you have any grants.gov questions, please go to them. There is a grants.gov training to get you prepared for applying, and you have my phone number and email there. And I thank you very much.